This week on To the Contrary.
First, women and minority voters rule the road to the White House. We talk with Donald Trump's campaign manager and former To the Contrary panelist Kellyanne Conway on her closing strategy to woo women. Then, going flat, women opt out of breast reconstruction after cancer surgery.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, will this be another year of the woman in American politics?
Donald Trump enjoyed a short surge, but Hillary Clinton still led in most battleground states at week's end. Polls showed Trump and Clinton essentially tied in critical swing states such as Nevada and Florida. But to win, Trump has to breach Clinton's so-called firewall. The good news for Democrats is Clinton leads the majority of the polls in the firewall states, but Trump was close behind in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Top surrogates for the candidates are fanning out, rallying supporters. Melania Trump is out stumping to try to win women's votes for her husband. On the other side, President Obama, Bernie Sanders, and Chelsea Clinton are trying to raise momentum among young people to vote for Hillary Clinton. She is winning with white college-educated women who typically vote Republican. I asked Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway, who's part of that group, her strategy for getting them to vote for Trump.
She's not winning all categories of women, but look, she's the first female president. The question really is, why isn't she at 65% among women? Why aren't there women in Washington, D.C. and New York City marching, closing down the streets saying, we need the first woman president? There's none of that. So reaching women who comprise a majority of the voters, Bonnie, is an incredibly important task for me as the campaign manager for Donald Trump. I would argue that there are things that we're going to do tactically and substantively. Substantively, Mr. Trump will continue to take his message about peace and prosperity and security to the American woman, female voter. We know that women are very concerned about security, affordability, fairness, and ethics. I call it the SAFE acronym. I hope that they're listening to the full message and not just the slop that makes up the tens of millions of dollars in negative advertising about Donald Trump.
Kellyanne Conway is the first woman to run a Republican presidential campaign. I asked her how she feels about that.
I feel like it's a blessing, and it carries a certain special responsibility, Bonnie, in that I'm here to support my client, my candidate's candidacy, and to make sure that what he is saying is being heard through the noise or the silence, whatever the case may be. And also, I would love for people to know the full measure of the man. I'd love for them to see somebody who's an amazing husband and father, who builds things, who fixes things, who solves problems. What I think I've tapped into are some of his natural gifts and skills, and particularly when it comes to talking about the issues. I'm very, very policy-centric and all about substance and solutions.
I asked her about other TV interviews she's given in which she said Donald Trump doesn't hurl personal invectives, when everyone has seen clips of him insulting Rosie O'Donnell, calling Clinton crooked, and getting into puerile Twitter fights using personal insults. I asked her how she faces her children after saying that.
Bonnie, it's very easy for me. I can't look my children in the eye, particularly my three daughters, and tell them that it was okay that I would vote for someone, or I vote for a woman just because of her gender. She shares my gender, but she doesn't share my values or my vision or, frankly, my way of operating.
Kellyanne says the negativity of this campaign has gotten personal for her.
I've got 4 small children, and Bonnie, at home. I really don't appreciate the death threats. I don't appreciate the awful things that are said on social media. It works both ways. Trust you me.
So, Congresswoman Edwards, you've been out on the stump for Hillary. Is she going to be able to mobilize and energize people of color and college-educated white women, which are two groups she really needs to win?
Absolutely, and it's already happening. The phone banking, canvassing, knocking on doors and pulling voters out to vote.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch, because he's going to do much better with women and minorities. It's called jobs, and it's called ethics.
I think at the end of the day, an enthusiastic vote or a dutiful vote doesn't matter. It's still one vote. And so do I believe that Hillary Clinton will be able to pull out those voters? Yes.
I think recent comments have made the assumption that support is galvanized amongst both those constituencies for Hillary Clinton, but there is still some room to grow for Donald Trump.
Why, if she wins white college-educated women, it'll be the first time since 1980 that the Republican candidate has not carried that demographic, and it's the richest demographic of women and, of course, the most educated. Why aren't they going for Trump? They haven't, but poll after poll shows she's winning women by double digits.
Well, part of it is some are swayed by electing the first woman. That is part of it. But we'll see how many of them come home, because a lot of them are starting to come home to the party. Married women, I think Trump will still continue to carry that demographic, which has been pretty reliable for Republicans.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, Mitt Romney won white women by 56% of the women's vote, and right now Donald Trump in the polls is, doing only about 47% among white women. So those women, especially the college-educated, more affluent ones who are in the suburbs, are really the swing voter, and this is where
Donald Trump... Is it just because she's a woman, or why is it?
No, it's not. In fact, time after time, all of our political science studies show that women vote party over gender, but I think what you see
But these are Republican women.
That's right. And I think what you see here are Republican women who down ballot are going to vote Republican. They are going to support other Republicans, but I think Donald Trump is a bridge too far.
I've read so many reports of women, when they heard that tape with Billy Bush, they had it. They absolutely had it. And as much as the campaign dismisses this and dismisses that, and, oh, I didn't say that, or walking back from this, that was the deal clincher.
I think the tape had a huge impact, I think, in terms of people's perceptions of Donald Trump and validating some of the concerns they had about him and his temperament. But what I think is more interesting over the past couple of weeks, what I've seen is that there's friends of mine who've been on this Women for Trump bus tour, women going all over the South and going and talking about Donald Trump as a man, talking about Donald Trump as a potential candidate. And what's transcended that dialogue about party has been policy over personality. These women are not apologists for Donald Trump, but what I've noticed about them is they're talking about the Supreme Court. They're saying, you know what, maybe I didn't love what he said on the tape, maybe I didn't like that, but you know what, at the end of the day, I'm worried about the court. The other thing they're not talking about is Obamacare, and I think that's something that a lot of people, whether you're a woman or you're a minority, and you're looking at your premiums, suddenly you're like, I'm seeing from a policy standpoint, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. Maybe I'm not excited about it. Maybe I close my eyes and do it. But I'm looking at it through the lens of this is the last chance to repeal Obamacare. And if there's people out there that think that, they may be gravitating towards a candidate they maybe were not excited about after the tapes.
I mean, look, the real reason that white women, college-educated women, are not excited about Donald Trump are because of the words coming out of his mouth that have been so misogynistic, that demonstrate a complete disregard for women, from the
or even
shaming,
conservative white college-educated women like Megyn Kelly.
I mean, from the fat shaming of Miss Universe Alicia Machado to the disparaging comments on the on the videotape that we all heard. Those are words coming directly out of Donald Trump's mouth every time, almost every time he takes to a microphone. And I think that college-educated white women are looking at that, and they're looking at his temperament, looking at his expertise on policy, and they're not buying it. And that is why you see the difference between the numbers for Mitt Romney and the numbers for Hillary Clinton. And I think that those are going to hold on Election Day. Time magazine's cover story, The Battle of the Sexes, talks a lot about all the gender bias that has been, all the things, even calling her crooked Hillary, which is not exactly presidential. We've never seen this kind of language from a Republican before. Is this the battle of the sexes? Is it going to end up being, an archetypal fight between men and women?
Most of the women I know don't even see Hillary as being the first female president. They see her as being a combative, unethical candidate who happens to be female. They actually see this as more of a battle between status quo and change, and in fact, that's what ends up bringing some people over. They want change in the country, and they see she will not be a change agent. She will be the same old politics.
And let me just say, this is where it's fascinating because the gender script has actually gotten flipped in this election. I keep sort of joking that this is really a conversation of crooked versus crazy, and this is really the first time in our history that crazy has been, in fact, identified and associated with a man, and crooked, which is typically a typical male politician, has been associated with a woman. So we, in essence,
how does that,
are turning this around.
Okay, and that's a brilliant observation. election, but how should women use this after the election to start, the same kind of thing?
Well,
no. The same thing that college kids have done with campus rape. Should older women, post-grads, be talking about, we're done with sexual assault, we're done with sexual remarks.
Well, I think no more than they're talking about we're done with race relations because Barack Obama is the first African-American president. And I think what I've seen is, especially at early vote locations, women really are identifying with Hillary Clinton as a woman. They may not say it in the polls. It may not be the thing that defines their vote, but they're clearly aware of that when they're going to vote.
Yeah, I think that, I would add to that.
Is it the battle of the sexes? I mean, if you read that Time piece, they just list, things that not only Trump have said, but his supporters and horrible things that have been said about Hillary. Language used that does not usually show up among presidential candidates or their surrogates. But you say Republican women, I'm seeing, Republican women dismiss it. Democratic women get fired up by it. Is that what's going on?
My reaction to that is simply this, is that I think that this country, frankly, has a lot of healing to do after this election, regardless of whether Donald Trump is president or Hillary Clinton is president. I think you're going to have to see that healing not only in Congress, but there are people that are reacting to this environment, and they're frustrated and they're angry and they want change. They want Congress to work for them. They want jobs. They want better wages, et cetera. And we don't have candidates talking about that because we're talking about whether he grabs something or she grabs something or she's a liar or she has bad emails. And I think if we can transcend that and get to the next place, then maybe we're not talking about these types of issues. We're actually talking about how we get the economy back up and running.
And Bonnie, let me just add this one other thing. We have been here before as a country. I get really frustrated with this idea that things are completely unprecedented. If you look at the 1884 election between Grover Cleveland and James G. Blaine, it was an unbelievably personal election that was incredibly ugly. James G. Blaine was called the Continental Liar from the state of Maine, and Grover Cleveland had an illegitimate child out of wedlock and had institutionalized the woman who had been the mother. So one of the things that is stunning about that election, when we look back, and historians often remark, is that had women been voting in that election, it's quite possible that Grover Cleveland would not have won. So,
but did the cable networks and the internet news organizations cover it in 1884?
Well, look, you know what? I will tell you this: the party organs that were the newspapers, including the New York Times back then, which was very much a party organ, published 3, newspapers a day. They had a morning, afternoon, and evening edition. All of them were read by partisans, and partisans were rallied to 90% vote turnout. Not anywhere near like what we get today.
Another question about Trump's late injection of Melania into the campaign. She spoke late in the week and said her big issue would be online bullying. And I have to quote Brooke Baldwin of CNN coming out of the clip of her saying that, said, does she know her husband?
This is something that I've said before, I'll say again. This is why he can be like Nixon going to China. He can go with credibility to the groups within our society that do the online bullying, the people who do the sexual assault and all that. And he can speak and she can speak from a position unlike what any Democrat could, with credibility, to say, this has got to stop. I recognize things I've done aren't great in the past. I'm stopping.
Well, what makes you think he's gonna? You're pulling out of the. I respect you. I respect you.
I think they will.
You're a long-time, Republican, supporter of women's issues, and I value that immensely. But when she says something like that, when you say he's going to turn around when he goes into the White House and become a completely different human being, do you think that's possible?
I think it is possible, and I'll tell you why. It's not just Melania. We're talking Ivanka. We're talking about, I know what they have in mind for her post-election. She is going to be the advocate for women. She is going to work with Melania, but she is going to probably be the leader on it, pushing for women on all sorts of levels, not only against sexual assault, but equal pay, all kinds of other things. She already has helped him craft his child care credits for working mothers. She feels very, very strongly and wants to be engaged to be a change agent for women within his administration, and Melania will work with her on it.
Here's the fact. Ivanka and Melania are not going to be president. Donald Trump and his Twitter account would be president. And I think all of us are given some pause with Melania because, one, she hasn't been out on the campaign trail, and to put her out there on cyberbullying when her husband is the cyber bully in chief, fat-shaming Miss Universe in the middle of the night, you know, and the way that he uses that Twitter account, I think it's just ridiculous. And I think the American people are actually tired of having a campaign that's, you know, being run by a guy who's demonstrated that he doesn't have any control, any self-control, and it doesn't matter that Melania is there or Ivanka is there. Donald Trump is the candidate, and he has demonstrated over and over again that he doesn't have the temperament.
Okay, we only have time for two. I want each of you to tell me, is Melania going to get any women to the polls? Can women relate to her? She's not like a normal woman. She's, you know, this model, and she's posed, and does the idea of having a first lady who posed nude for a girly magazine in Europe, is that appealing to women?
What other surrogates does Donald Trump have? As much as his wife is right now, he's got to use somebody, and she's out there talking about these issues.
And France France survived having their first lady have those sort of things. So hey.
I mean, look, I'll stick up for, you know, Melania. I think she is absolutely doing what she needs to do, which is be at her husband's side as somebody who could potentially be first lady. This is the job of a spouse.
Will she? Can she relate? Can somebody watching, you know, the cable networks from their trailer relate to her with all her glamour and her emphasis on beauty and over-sexualization?
I would just say that our entire celebrity culture is the reason why we have Donald Trump to begin with. So if Americans weren't relating to a sense of celebrity and glamour and maybe a different lifestyle, maybe the lifestyles of the rich and famous, we probably wouldn't have this candidacy.
All right.
They're going to love her.
Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie or Bay or at To The Contrary, behind the headlines. Going flat. It's a term coined by women who've not just survived but triumphed over breast cancer and decided not to have breast reconstruction surgery. The website, The Breast and the Sea, is the brainchild of one woman who had breast cancer and a photographer using both women's talents to empower breast cancer survivors.
Rebecca Pine was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was just 33 and had one breast removed and reconstructed. 4 years later, she had a prophylactic mastectomy of her other breast and had the reconstructed breast removed.
I feel so much happier actually having nothing than having the implant there. For me, this is just who I am, and it's just being natural. I loved having my breasts. They were a part of my life forever. And I really, you know, it was a big loss for me to have to say goodbye to them. But for me, I'd rather have nothing than have something that wasn't part of my natural skin.
Miss Pine spent time at the ocean, a very spiritual and healing place for her. She felt the need to connect with and support other women who'd had unreconstructed lumpectomies and mastectomies to reinforce the idea that breast reconstruction is not a foregone conclusion.
It's very healing to be connecting with other survivors, to be embracing ourselves as we are, to be, just coming into acceptance that there are many blessings through an experience such as breast cancer that actually make us stronger. And, it's a wonderful thing to be able to transform a difficulty and take positive things from that.
So connections with other women turned into photo shoots with photographer and collaborator Miana June, and a traveling exhibition, a website, and they hope a book. Ms. Pine also offers workshops by the sea for women who bear their scars to help themselves heal.
I think it's very, very powerful to embrace ourselves as we are and to find our beauty and be able to transform our pain into something that's really quite different.
But as many women will say, it's still a man's world, where commercial exploitation and promotion of a certain type of female beauty can be devastating to women who don't fit into the mold.
We really should not be defined by whether we have two breasts or one breast or no breasts. We live in a society that is so much emphasizing how women look and how there's so many shoulds.
Ms. Pine felt that pressure not just on herself, but on her daughter as well.
I have a daughter who's 5 years old, and everywhere we go, from all around the world, the people that we meet say, "Oh, she's so pretty," you know? And I feel like I have to say something to her afterward. More importantly, you're kind, you know? And she really gets the message that beauty is what's within, and that's the most important.
So as a survivor, Ann Stone, what do you think of this movement?
Well, I think that it, again, expands women's choices, and it's a choice that many women are choosing. I have a female member of my family who chose to go flat and had cancer at a very early age. You know, for myself, I was lucky that I was able to do it with a lumpectomy. And in fact, I've been cancer-free for 13 years.
Yay!
Yeah, but I had a male oncologist first that I discharged because he kept pushing me to try to get me to do full chemo. And I kept questioning whether or not I had stage 1, if that was necessary. Got a female oncologist who agreed with what I wanted to do. And I said, why do they push, you know, the other stuff? And she said, it's, you know,
money.
Yeah. It really comes down to money.
Breastcancer.org, a website, had a reference to a study saying that 56% of women choose reconstructive surgery and 44% don't. I was actually surprised by the 44%. I didn't think it was that high. I thought there was a lot more pressure to rebuild.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think really this is just a sign that women have more choice to really be and do what is right for them. I mean, I do think that there is a lot of societal pressure to fit into sort of a perfectionist mold, but I also think that many women now know that what's most important is really who they are, not what they appear to be.
Well, they may know that, but how long before society agrees with them? I mean, I think we're pretty far away from, you know, all of society being able to look at those beautiful photographs and not think something to themselves that they find some aspect of it, I hate to say this, but unappealing. You know, and I say that as someone who, if I ever get breast cancer, I am so going flat. Mm-hmm. I can't, you know, I just get rid of them. I don't want a recurrence. I would do what she's doing.
I thought the story was powerful, and thank you, Ann, for sharing your story. I think that's a big part of this. Is a lot of this is about awareness. I think I didn't know that number, the 44% either, but it made me think. I had a friend who recently got a prophylactic mastectomy, a double mastectomy, and she almost hesitated to tell me. And it's funny because I had no idea. She took a month off of work, but again, we're not in this place where people are talking about it, trying to explain her decision.
So wait a second, a prophylactic double mastectomy because she had the BRCA gene?
Mm-hmm, that's correct. And so I think when I heard that story, I thought, wow, why didn't I know this like 2 months ago? I could have supported her, could have been a great friend to her. But I think about this in the sense of the cosmetic comment that you make with respect to choices that women have. And we don't expect every woman who goes through chemoradiation to wear a wig because we don't like the fact that she might be balding or losing her hair. But for some reason, this is more important. And we have this sort of societal optical concern, whether that's men or women, being concerned like, well, you need to have breasts, right? So I think there was still a long way to go. I agree with you. But again, I think that this is a very powerful thing to be talking about, and I'm glad that it's out there in the book and the blog.
Well, and it is, and to embrace.
So they're hoping for a book. They don't have it yet. They're looking for a publisher.
Right, and to just embrace the choices that women make without making a judgment about it. And I think what's been startling to me, though, is that I would like to see more black and brown women's faces in these stories, because when black and brown women get cancer, it's diagnosed later, the prognosis is worse, and there is, you know, more mortality. And so it would be great to, you know, to make sure that women of color have the ability to express themselves and embrace their choices as well.
Is Obamacare getting women of color more access to breast cancer care?
More, I mean, one is both, you know, sort of what is happening with the breast cancers. There are triple negative breast cancers for black women in particular that are much more aggressive and difficult for black women. But, you know, getting mammograms earlier and also destigmatizing mammograms and the treatment for cancer. And we still have a lot of work to do.
Well, one of the other big things is research, and be your own advocate and really look into it, and don't let anyone push you into anything.
Tell you what, be your own Ralph Nader. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.